My underwear drawer, yeah, that's where this is headed. My underwear drawer has become a catch-all for whatever must be kept out of the children's reach. It's the only place in the bedroom I can hide anything, so it's where I put screws that fall out of furniture, paper clips, loose change, chokeable toy parts, whatever. And recently, it got to the point where I was trying to put laundry away, and I couldn't. There was no room in the drawer for underwear. So I started digging stuff out, and Sarah walked up to peek into this treasure trove of choking hazards, and she pointed and said, "Daddy, is that a tooth? Are you the tooth fairy?" In fact, it was. The first response to pop into my head was, yeah, I'm the Easter Bunny too, but I wisely kept my mouth shut. I'm secure and affirming, but I'm not necessarily so keen on my kids telling teachers their dad is a secret fairy. And a bunny. Santa, too. My kids see Mommy kissing Santa Claus all the time, but they don't know it because I spend 364 days a year in disguise. Jackson asked me about the Easter Bunny. Where's he from? What's his story? Ah, yes. In fact, I know him well. He likes carrots and candy. Anxious, kind of jumpy, prolific breeder. He's been the subject of some cruel experiments. He was born in the South Bronx in 1979, and he knows everything about you. Jackson thoughtfully observed, I don't think the Easter Bunny really cares whether kids have been good or bad. He's a sociopath. Yeah, because he's a rabbit and somehow a Christian, so he's got the whole faith versus works conundrum to deal with. That's a lot of theological complexity for a harebrain. Personally, I do think the Easter Bunny has some basic principles. We do the egg hunt indoors, and if the children have got through the whole winter without completely trashing the house, then it'll be easier to find the candy. But if the place is a mess, it'll take months. You'll still be finding hidden Easter treats on Halloween. I was digging for my mummy mask and I found this marshmallow bird. Can I still eat it? If it was a real marshmallow, I'd say no, but that stuff will last forever. Maybe if you eat it, you won't need a mummy mask. You'll already be embalmed. Archaeologists 3,000 years from now will find Easter candy we hid and wonder about our culture. Truly, this was what they valued most. Look how well they hid it. One Easter, I bought a white chocolate crucifix. Let me say that again. White chocolate crucifix. Not in tinfoil, but in a box with a plastic window, so you could actually see this candy version of this humiliating atrocity device. A white chocolate Jesus would have been hilarious, but this was just obscene. And I put it on my bookshelf in front of my textbooks from seminary school because nothing in all of those New Testament commentaries was going to tell me more about Christianity than the white chocolate cross. It stood there for 5 years. It never changed. I was going to save it for when Jesus returned in judgment, so I could show him this thing that couldn't decompose and say, before you start judging anybody for not taking you seriously enough, look at this. Behold. Also, I'm the Easter Bunny. Unfortunately, it took a while to unpack my seminary books after we moved here, and after 4 years in the basement, I found it again, water damaged, so I threw it out. Maybe if I'd enclosed it in a tomb. Never mind. Nowhere in the Gospels, even in the wacky lost Gospels, does anybody say that Jesus emerged from the tomb and rabbits swarmed out of it. He did frequently use the catchphrase, anyone with 2 good ears had better listen, but I don't think he meant bunny ears. Rabbits are only mentioned in the Good Book when God, upon Mount Sinai, commands Moses that they are not kosher. Twice, in both Leviticus and Deuteronomy, and the hare, because he cheweth the cud, but divideth not the hoof, he is unclean to you. But rabbits persist in rebelling against the scriptural decree that they must cough up their food and chew it again. Also, rabbits don't lay eggs, never mind chocolate eggs. There's no chocolate in the Bible. It comes from South America. Just think of how Scripture would have been different. Pharaoh, thou pursuest the Hebrews in thy rage. But eat of this Toblerone pyramid, and thou mightst feel not so wroth about the whole thing. On the other hand, the Easter Bunny is a magical rabbit. Who am I to say it can't lay eggs? I live in western New York, where chickens have fingers and buffalo have wings. There is an old Easter story in which a goddess found this little bird who was freezing to death, So she magically gave it a wonderful fur coat, which, of course, was a rabbit coat, and the bird, which now had become a rabbit, still retained the power to lay an egg at just this time of year as winter turned to spring. The egg, as an ancient symbol of superfertility, makes sense because of its rocky, apparent lifelessness. Life springing forth from such an inanimate object must have seemed miraculous. The egg is like a seed, but we never get to see a seed sprout. It's not that dramatic anyway. It's not like a carrot pokes its head out of a seed and starts chirping. The word Easter comes from Ostara, the Anglo-Saxon designation for a fertility goddess with many names. The Babylonians called her Ishtar and told tales of her journey to the underworld, how she died and 3 days later rose again, then negotiated a deal in which her husband and sister-in-law would take turns spending half the year down there in her place. This could be the oldest surviving version of the popular myth of the dying rising god to explain the alternation of barren and fertile seasons. The Greek Persephone, Egyptian Osiris, along with Attis, Adonis, and Jesus, for that matter. All of these different cultures have their variation of this core myth that the cold, dark, gloomy sadness of winter can make us feel like the earth has been abandoned, like some life-giving deity has journeyed or been abducted into the underworld. It's not a suspense story the way it used to be. Now we've got calendars to spoil the surprise. Any February, you can turn to the May page and say, according to this Norman Rockwell painting, teeny boppers will gather at soda fountains again. And look, poodle skirts will come back in style. But before Norman Rockwell calendars, there was some genuine suspense. In the ancient Babylonian story of Ishtar's journey to the underworld, the sky gods were genuinely scared. Look down there. No bull mounting a cow, no young man impregnating a girl in the street. Soda fountains and poodle skirts hadn't been invented yet. Is this the end of the world? But then in spring, Ishtar returns. Barrenness gives way to new birth. Jacob Grimm, in his studies of Germanic folk tales and customs, wrote, Ostara, Istra, seems therefore to have been the divinity of the radiant dawn, of upspringing light, a spectacle that brings joy and blessing, whose meaning could be easily adapted by the resurrection day of the Christian's God. Bonfires were lighted at Easter, and according to popular belief of long standing, the moment the sun rises on Easter Sunday morning, he gives 3 joyful leaps. He dances for joy. Here also heathen notions seem to have grafted themselves onto great Christian festivals. Maidens clothed in white, who at Easter, at the season of returning spring, show themselves in clefts of rock and on mountains, are suggestive of the ancient goddess. Grimm also referred to sword dances, colored eggs, and, quote, pastry of heathenish form, whatever that means. There's always been something heathenish about Easter, or really, there's recently been a bizarre Christian wrapping on the old pagan fertility holiday, like colored tinfoil pressed around a candy egg. The early church once tried to rename the holiday and call it Pasch, after the Paschal Lamb, but the peasants refused to call it that, which I really appreciate. It sounds so ugly. We waited all winter for this? And imagine Irving Berlin trying to write a sonnet about a Pasch bonnet. That's the only Easter song I can think of, and it never mentions the crucifixion, Jesus' journey into hell, the resurrection, none of that. Just a hat and a rotogravure. Because the songwriter was Jewish, he also wrote White Christmas, the most famous holiday song of all time, which also never mentions Jesus. When I was a kid, Easter was a special Sunday when our parents struggled to get us scrubbed and brushed and dressed up in miniature grown-up clothes. We were forced to sit still on church pews and then marched through a rigid communion assembly line. Then they took us home and turned us loose to ransack the house or yard like savages looking for candy wrapped like shiny treasure. Earthly treasure, no less. It's sort of a mishmash. Store up your treasure and, oh, forget it. Just tear the world apart. Knock your siblings out of the way and grab all you can. Actually, Easter did teach me not to store up treasure on Earth, because it turns out Earth is exactly where your younger brother will look for it, find it, and eat the whole stash. All that candy I hid. I thought I was going to retire at 9, but no. I guess the lesson was, don't put all your eggs in one basket. One year, I remember I found the perfect hiding spot, lifting a heavy grate and putting my candy in a floor vent. Except it was a heating vent, and the smell of melting chocolate totally gave my hiding place away. I'm a little bit scared to do an Easter candy hunt with my kids. P.S. Why hunt? They're not trying to kill the rabbit. I'm scared it'll teach them competition and thievery, and I'm super scared it'll teach them that tearing the house apart will produce candy. That doesn't sound like apostles. It sounds like pirates. Pillaging, plundering, treasure-digging pirates. I still don't get it. Dress your kids up in white, fancy clothes and then send them rummaging and foraging in the dirt? Easter is the day when the birds and lizards look at us and think, truly this is the most reckless and foolish of species. It's not even a real egg. Regardless, I see things getting better. April showers are melting the sidewalk ice, and since we don't have to look down for shiny patches, we can finally smile at each other again. The curbside snowbanks are receding, and with more room to drive and park, motorists are honking less. The punks who practice in the basement next door are less angsty and loud at night, which means Elizabeth is less goth in the morning. Who knows? Could be feeling disco this evening. Maybe I'm overly optimistic, but I can't help it. I am the Easter Bunny. Thank you for listening. This has been Animal Magic. Stay tuned. There's more animal magic somewhere.